Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the AgileLIVE webinar on Scaling Agile to the Program and Portfolio Levels, Part 2. Version 1 is pleased to sponsor the AgileLIVE Thought Leadership webinar series, which are focused on helping companies scale Agile faster, easier, and smarter. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few logistics. The presentation will last approximately 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. For those of you who haven't used On24 before, I'd like to point out a few areas in the audience console. All participants are muted throughout the presentation, so if you have any questions, feel free to send them to us through the Q&A panel on our console. We'll try to address those during the course of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll address them during the Q&A portion. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly after today's webinar. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to send us a note through the same Q&A panel, and an On24 representative will be happy to assist you. I would also like to encourage you to share your aha moments with everybody during the event by using the Twitter panel. In addition, you can download today's slides by clicking on the Slides widget or the folder widget down below and download the slides. Finally, today's presentation is going to be recorded, and we will be sending an email to everyone in a few days with a link to the recording. Now let's move on to the presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave Gunther, and he is an Agile coach and product consultant for version 1 and the moderator for today's event. Dave has more than 20 years of software product development experience, including over 6 years coaching and helping companies to scale Agile. He has been instrumental in multiple organizational Agile transformations and helped multiple product delivery teams achieve a cycle of continuous improvement and predictable delivery. So on to you, Dave.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everybody. I had a great time working on Part 1 with Mike McLaughlin. We had a great webinar last week, and thank you for all the follow-up questions. We got a lot of activity, a lot of great questions, and overall it was a great success. So I'm looking forward to the presentation today. And on to that presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Andy Powell, a product evangelist for version 1 and the feature presenter. Andy has a 12-year career in software development industry, and he has assisted numerous 500-plus person Agile tool rollouts with companies such as Siemens, Adobe, EMC, and Sabre, giving him a considerable amount of experience in leading major Agile projects. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Andy, who's going to be speaking and giving a summary of what we talked about in Part 1, as well as giving us a good overview of how version 1 can support scaling Agile in your organization. So take it away, Andy.
Thanks, Dave. And everyone, I'm happy to be here today. It's been pretty fun to be at version 1 and see how Agile has gone from this development team management approach to an organizational approach for delivering value over the last couple of years. We're starting to see some amazing success stories within our customer base. For instance, last year I visited a customer where they were able to cut their lead time for new features down from several quarters to 10 weeks. And I think that's the kind of business impact that a lot of larger organizations were looking for when they started their Agile transition. So we're really starting to get there, and I hope today you can see how version 1 supports that for you guys even better. And I'd like to start with a poll so everyone can understand kind of where they are in their journey compared to the others on the webinar. So take a moment to think about within your organization, where are you guys? Are you just getting started with Agile? Are you using Agile at the team level? And getting comfortable with that, or are you starting to move down the road of saying, no, we've got Agile work in our organization and we're scaling at the program and portfolio levels, or maybe are you at the point where you've got Agile working at all the levels and you're looking to sharpen the saw today and continue scaling it across your enterprise? So I'll give you a couple moments there to submit the poll, and then we'll take a look at the results. All right, and so for the people that are attending today, we've got, I think, as you'd expect, a pretty broad section, but it's nice to see that the majority of people are in that starting to scale to the program and portfolio levels. And I think for a lot of version 1 customers even, they started out with our product when they were at the Agile team level. And so now as we're looking at helping them grow in their adoption, they're able to, in version 1, do a lot of the program and portfolio level Agile, which I'm going to dive into today. So before we look at the product, as Dave said, I wanted to do a quick recap of part 1, since that was a week ago, and I know everyone had a fun weekend. Let's take a quick stroll through some of the key points they made last week. So first off, Dave and Mike, they talked about 4 key areas for focus when scaling: the organizational, you have to figure out how your organization will be structured, roles and responsibilities, communication and coordination, practices and tools. They touched on this concept of a minimally marketable feature and the fact that in a lot of larger organizations, it's generally not something that can get delivered by a single team. That might be the ideal. You'd like for the single team to be able to deliver it, but that is not always the case. And that really creates some challenges in the organization with management. They looked at, from an organizational structure standpoint, you have those levels of portfolio level thinking, program level thinking and planning, and then the project level planning. And they touched on how a lot of times the portfolio level can be a little bit disconnected from what's going on at the team level. And that's certainly the case a lot of times in organizations where they're just getting started with Agile, and maybe the teams are starting to think about how they're delivering in a way that's different from the portfolio level. Next, they dug into each of those levels, and so the team is the thing, right? The Agile teams are really that heartbeat of Agile. The high-performing team is essential to making all this work. They touched on programs, and they defined a program as an organization of people, processes, and assets aligned to produce value in a particular investment theme. And then they touched on the portfolio level, the point I made a little bit earlier, where you have this concept of the easy-bake PMO, where sometimes a business is still looking at software development as something where they can just take the order, and we're trying to move with an Agile approach to delivering that incremental value and not expecting to have the perfect baked project come out the other side. So that was one of the first 2 points around organization and roles and responsibility, and then communication and alignment. They touched on what I think is a very important element, and we'll see in version 1 today, and that is how synchronization and cadence can allow you to make trade-off decisions much more easily. If you have your teams ending sprints at the same time and your programs aligned to those boundaries, you're able to come together and make those value-based decisions on what is most important and make sure you have people working on those most important things. And then finally, their final point, practices and tools. They mentioned focusing on quality, broadening good practices and ceremonies, expose and coordinate the value delivery hierarchy, and thinking lean. A key point there was the focus on ceremonies and really getting good at ceremonies at the different levels of scale. So if you're coming from the kind of team level Agile community, you're pretty familiar with what's going on there, but really starting to change how you're interacting and collaborating at the program and portfolio levels. And another, I think, important slide that they talked about was this starting to introduce lean concepts, and one of those being limiting your work in progress. And so here we're talking about priority and capacity. So if you really have a good handle on your work in progress and you're understanding that, you're planning how you're using that capacity well, you're going to be optimizing your delivery and getting the most value from your development organization. So that's a quick summary of what we went through. And for the demonstration today, what I'm going to do is first start out by giving you some laying the groundwork for the project level, where we get into how the Agile teams work in version 1. I'm going to do that quickly so that we can then build upon that, because when you get to the program level, you're then starting to look at how those teams interoperate and relate. So it's nice to have that framework to understand it. And then we'll push back out further to the portfolio level so you can see how it all fits together. So with that, I'd like to jump into the demonstration. And Dave, I just want to do a quick screen check to make sure that you are indeed seeing everything as we'd expect at this point.
Yep, it looks good on my end. Thanks, Andy.
Okay. So everyone who isn't already familiar with version 1, I've pulled up our application, and it is a web-based application. So in order to save real estate, I'm just full screening the browser here today. And before I get into the details, I wanted to really point out what I think is one of the reasons that version 1 is different from how you might be looking at your other options in the tool space. And the first thing I'd like to show you is the fact that version 1 is really focused on collaboration and alignment. And you do that through having a place where a team can come and look at the work they have and talk about the work they have. And so here I just pulled out the version 1 team room. And so team rooms for your development team is a place where you can see a task board or you can see a storyboard for the work that you have within a particular sprint or the work that you're currently focused on. And you're also able to have conversations around that work. And the team room, I'll get into more details later, but it becomes a place where as a member of that team, you can come and collaborate day to day to understand how you're progressing on the work that's been assigned to you. And another place where we have teams in the organization, and this is where I think the Agile principles start to expand, is within the program and the portfolio levels. So like you can have a team in version 1, a development team collaborating, you also want to have collaboration for your product leadership team. You want to have collaboration for your release team. All those different teams that you have that are going to have to work together to make sure you're delivering software. So in a planning room in version 1, you're able to see the people that are involved in making sure at a portfolio level that you're working on the right things. You can see here a Kanban board of the initiatives that are underway for a particular organization or portfolio. And you're also able to have conversations around those. So similar to how your teams are having conversations, you can also be having conversations with those leadership the leadership within your software organization. So planning rooms become a place where you can come and have that quick shared dashboard of how are things going. And so I want to touch on that more in detail later, but just to give you some insight into what makes version 1 different, we're providing a place where you can both track the work and make sure that the work is fully aligned through those different planning levels, and then collaborate on that work as you're going within those teams that you've defined in your organization. So, like I said, I jump in, and first I want to give you a little bit of context for the demonstration data I want to go through today, because when you talk about software development, and especially Agile at scale, it is a pretty complex environment. So we really have to understand what we're looking at. So to start off, I wanted to look at the different planning levels available in version 1. So when you set up version 1, the planning levels are a place where you set it up to match the way your organization is structured. So you'll plan at the portfolio level. And underneath your portfolio, you're going to have one or more programs. And remember, a program is defined as that group of people who are really trying to deliver towards a particular value stream, a particular area of investment for the organization. It might be, in your company, a line of business, or it could be a product suite, or if it's a really large product with many components, maybe it's just a single product. Then underneath the program, you start to a lot of times see different products or different components, a service layer. The areas where you're doing planning and saying, for this part of my overall program, I'm defining priorities. You'll have priorities at the program level, but then a lot of times there's a level down where you get into really having a product backlog if you're thinking about your Scrum terminology. And then underneath that, you'll get into your releases, and each different area where you're planning, you tend to use releases as that bucket for what you're going to get done in the next quarter or so forth. So that's the idea with planning levels in version 1. And for some of you who are current users, right, I'm calling this planning levels, but in your system it may be called projects. So we've got our planning levels. But we also have to manage the work, right? There's work flowing through at the portfolio level and the program level and the product level, and that's done in version 1 through the epic tree. And so as we look at epics in version 1, what we're seeing is a breakdown of your business initiatives. So at my portfolio, I have an epic for Cloud Call Center Release 1. That can, as I drill into it, I'll see a level further down of detail for the features. And I can keep going down until I get to those individual stories and defects that would be delivered by those Agile teams. So the epics becomes a place where you can see the work that's being done and break down the work in a way that allows you to focus on delivery. And so when I look at the portfolio level in version 1, what I'll see at the top is my initiatives, because that's where I'm planning those items. And then if I start changing my context and looking at the program level, so in this case my development program, because I have a single program for my portfolio, now I'm seeing a type of features. And I can keep going further down until I get all the way down to the release level. And at the release level, what I'm mostly looking at is my backlog items and defects. Here I can see that flat list of what are the stories, what are the defects that we're going to work on, and start focusing on planning those through to sprints. Now, if you are at the team level, this release level, you start to not have the full context for, well, where did this quick status check come from? So one of the things version 1 wants to do is make sure that is right there and available for the individual teams. So when you're down at the release level, you can take something like quick status check and just go and look at how it relates back to those higher level epics. So I can quickly see in my relationship visualization here that quick status check is part of an order check feature, which is part of this Cloud Call Center business initiative. And I can see other relationships as well, like what are my downstream dependencies, and I'll touch more on that later. So no matter if you're coming from the team level perspective and wanting to understand how this item fits in, or if you're coming from the top down and you start with the initiative and you wanted to see how it's been elaborated into its pieces, version 1's giving you the ability to stay connected and aligned across your organization. So that's a little bit of context and how everything kind of pieces together in regards to the way you're planning as well as the work that you're delivering through those different organizational layers. And what I wanted to do now was walk through that team layer so you get a feeling for what's going on there, and then we'll bounce out to the program layer. So first off, for the team layer, right, when I'm inside a release, right, I have a backlog of my stories and defects that I can prioritize in a list. Then eventually, if I'm doing my release planning, I'm going to want to make sure I get work scheduled into my sprints. So there's a place where you can create your sprints and then also take the work from the release backlog and assign it up into the sprint where it makes sense. Then as I go into a sprint, I'll want to go ahead and do some detailed planning so I can focus in on my current sprint, plan out my stories. And planning out a story is the process of defining the tasks and tests for that particular story. So once I'm finished with my plan, if I look at Enter RMA here, one that's already been planned out, I can see my acceptance criteria for that story as well as any tasks I've created in version 1 if I'm tracking at that level of detail. So after you as a team, you've come together and created that backlog, then for that day-to-day interaction where you're doing a lot of collaboration, that's where you get back to the team room being helpful. And so here I've gone into a team room for this Scrum team, and they're able to look at their task board. They can track their work. If I started to work on this Enter RMA story, I could pull up the details page, understand everything there is around it, look at any conversations we've had in the past around that story, and begin my work. Tracking the work is done right through the boards, so you're able to go ahead and track the amount of effort and to-do that you've put towards a particular task. And eventually, as you finish up the story, you'll go ahead and close it, which then removes it from the board, so you're able to focus on the most important items. As you progress through the sprint, eventually you'll complete that sprint. You'll get to the end of your time box, and then the sprint review section allows you to kind of wrap up, close out the current sprint, making sure you've taken care of any stories that maybe you didn't get to, and also capture the results of any retrospectives you might have had. So here we're trying to allow the team to have an environment where they can collaborate on the work that's happening and keep tabs on everything that's going on as they progress through their sprint. One point I want to make before we jump into program level is that within version 1, you will find that, especially if you start to see some teams experiment with Kanban, you'll start to see that not every team is working exactly the same way in a larger organization. And version 1 supports that as well through workspaces. So here I'm looking at a team that's working on release 1, and they have this flow set up for their stories. It's a pretty simple flow that it would probably work well for a Scrum team. In version 1, you can use workspaces and set up flows that are very different. So here's an example of a team that focuses more on maintenance work, so not as much upfront planning, where they've defined some classes of service. They've also created a workflow that's much more elaborate so that they can really focus on the lean principles like time and status. And so that's all possible in version 1. You don't have to have every team doing things the exact same way. You can have your team level process be varied such that you're able to do the Agile the way that's working for you. So that's what I wanted to cover for team level, to give everyone that level playing field as we move forward into the program. And Dave, I did want to touch base real quick before we kind of bounce out to that next level of scale to see if there's any questions that came up around the structure of version 1 or the what they're seeing on the screen that might be worth answering now.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, there's one good question here. Is there a convenient way to view the sprint burn down and velocity of the team?
Yes, that's a great question. So I didn't go into every aspect of the team room, but one of the reports that's right there at the top right is the sprint burn down. So you want to keep that in front of the team on a daily basis if your focus is on Scrum and or XP, anywhere you're using iterations, right? Having that burn down report and really rallying around trying to get the work in the sprint completed becomes important. You also can see next to it, it shows you here the planned velocity and then your average velocity. So there's a little spark diagram that gives you some insight into what have you done in the past from a velocity standpoint. So we're trying to put that those really key reports right there in the team room so that you don't have to search around if you're a team member to find those. And there's other places in the application where you can get those reports with a little bit more detail. And as we go through, I'll point that out.
Great, Andy.
All right.
I think the rest of the questions will be good for toward the end. So continue on to the next session.
All right. So let me jump back up in the tree now. And I've gone back up to the program level, and I'm going to go over to the Epic tree page. And as I showed you before, when you're at the program level, you're seeing features, right? The program level, the work item that they care about is trying to deliver a feature. It could be one or more stories that you're trying to deliver something out that has real end user value. And so here we're looking at features, and I wanted to go ahead and just walk through how you might create a new feature. So if you look at the program level here, you're seeing the features. Well, what are they a part of? They're part of this Cloud Call Center Release 1.0 Epic. So let me go ahead and create a new feature for that Epic. And so I'll go ahead and create a feature for call history. That might be helpful. And go find the Epic that it's a part of, select it. And that's going to be part of my call center product. I know what that it's for that. And then there's a field down here for swag. So in version 1, we have a higher level estimate field that you can use that's above story points that you can use to start planning at your program level and also at your portfolio level if you'd like. And the idea here is that you're not going to know all your stories yet. You're still thinking about it in terms of user value, and you haven't gotten in front of the teams to know what the estimate is, but you can get a high-level understanding of the sizing of that item. So organizations will figure out what they want to use as their unit of measure for that. And let's say here I've got a swag of 5. I can put that on my this feature level Epic, and then I will save that Epic. Now, as it goes into the application, you are going to see it there at the bottom of the list. So in version 1, when you're creating an item, it's going to go at the bottom of the backlog until you start to go ahead and prioritize it into the correct location. So I can move up call history, so when I come back and look at this program later, it'll be in the right spot. As you go ahead and do this prioritization and figure out your different features, at some point you get to saying, well, okay, I have my prioritized list, but I don't need to build a backlog for the next 5 years. I really need to focus on what's going to happen in the next release. And so organizationally, you want to have more of a time-based focus at that point. And so version 1 has a couple of things that can help there. The first thing I wanted to show is release scheduling, and this is actually something we've updated recently. If I look down at my call center product, so I'm the person who's within this program for call center planning out the different features I'm going to want to have within the next release. I can see here I'm looking at my backlog of unscheduled work for call center. I've got a few features that have been outlined here. And then on the left, I've got my releases. So if you look at release 1, I can see the amount of swag that's in that. And this is potentially the release that's underway or almost completed. And release 2 maybe is where I'm planning now. And you'll notice how the release 1 has a whole bunch of estimate, right? That's because the team has gone in and elaborated those stories and defects. They have a lot more detail about the work that they're doing. Now, release 2, not as much estimate. You may have put in a couple of items that you know you want to make sure get done that have already been broken down from previous elaboration. But your focus here at release planning, for a lot of organizations as they're scaling, tends to be on what are the key features I need. I haven't had the teams look into them fully yet, but I do want to make sure that I get those features on the plate of things we need to elaborate as we go ahead and start planning out release 2. And so they'll take the list of work here for the call center product and say, well, you know what, accounting reps, knowledge base, that's something I want to go ahead and plan in to release 2, so I'll drag that over. And then as I do that, I'll see my swag increase. And you'll eventually get to the point where you have the swag matching the level of swag that you think you can get done in that release. So this planning at a feature level for your products and for your programs. That's something that as we've worked with our larger customers, we've seen be very valuable for them. They don't want to engage the teams right away, but they do need to get a feeling for what's kind of our roadmap look like as we start to plan over time. And that takes me to the Epic Timeline view. So if you're going ahead and planning out your program, the call center product, we have a set of features. We might even bounce up to the program level and say, across all my products, what are the different features that I want to be getting done? And so in this case, we can see how the features lay out over time. So here I can see release 1 and release 2 on my calendar timeline. And then for certain features, I can see here, and let me go ahead and quickly update this call center feature and put that in release 2 as well. For certain features, I can see that they're part of a particular release. And in this case, accounting integration, it's part of release 1. If we look at the details page, I can see that it's got a planned begin and planned end date. But other features I may say, well, we're not actually going to start order shipping at the beginning of our release time frame. And so we can provide a little bit more detail around when we plan to begin work on it so people can get an understanding of that, and then when we expect to end. So with a timeline view, you get a feeling for what's going to happen when as you look at. Let me go ahead and just go back to release scheduling to wrap up that discussion to make sure people heard that. So if I'm someone who is focused at the call center product, so let's say I'm a product manager, the person who's making those value-based decisions around which features make the most sense for the next release, I can take work from the backlog that I have for my product overall, whether it's the more detailed stories and defects or the features I have defined. I can drag those into the release, use my swag as an indicator of when I'm reaching my full capacity.
Hey, Andy.
Because yes.
Just real quick, are you sharing your screen? I think we're still seeing the demonstration slide.
You are seeing. Okay, let me try to share it again. I was sharing, and there it's going now. I'm seeing the live view update. So thanks, Dave.
Great, appreciate it.
All right, so I was here at the release scheduling page. Sorry, everyone. Taking work from this call center product, dragging it into the release. And as I transitioned there, I was saying that the swag value you have is one way that you can look at what is my capacity. What this release scheduling doesn't do is tell you kind of when is that capacity going to happen or be needed, and that's where a timeline view can be more helpful. You may have certain features that you're going to start working on them at a particular time frame. So something like order check here, it's in release 1. If we look at it, it's been assigned to release 1, but we also can put in a planned begin date if we have a good feeling for when it's going to occur. And as you're going ahead and capturing that information, below your timeline view of when the features are going to happen, you can also see there's a trend of the amount of swag you have in play at any one time. And as you get to the end of release 2 here, we can see that there is an increased amount of swag in play, which might signal that you're over capacity during that time frame. So you might want to look at whether improved search maybe needs to get pushed out to the following release, or how you're going to be able to address that before you go into the planning for your release 2. So those are a couple of important concepts that help you with that program-level capacity planning, both being able to do the release planning activity at the feature level and then have a time-based view that helps you make sure that you're slotting your features in a way that is really realistic for the organizational capacity you have. So that's kind of at a high level for the program planning. Then you get into the teams are involved in doing the release planning itself, and for a lot of organizations, you start to have this need to understand your cross-team dependencies. So a feature might be something you can deliver with a single team, but lots of times you might have a dependency across teams. And so I already showed you very quickly the sprint scheduling page and how it's something that can be used as you're taking work and from your overall backlog up into the sprint. But it also becomes important when you're thinking about your dependencies. So if we go back and say, look at our release 1, let's assume that we've just completed our release planning, and we've said, here are the features we want to do, and now the team's gone through and determined all the stories, and they've also potentially found some dependencies. So as you look at the work that you've scheduled into your sprints, the items that have a dependency are going to have a little icon next to them, and the icon is going to tell you the state of the dependency. So here, quick status check. It's green along with all the other ones, except for here, calculate shipping. That's in red because the dependency is broken. So the dependencies are managed by according to the scheduling into a sprint. So if I took the update RMA item and I dragged it back into sprint 5, let's see what happens to its dependency. And you can see here how update RMA now turned yellow, and that's because if we go ahead and look at its details page and check out its upstream dependencies, it's going to have something that is scheduled to the same sprint. Indeed, enter RMA is in that same sprint 5. And so that's the concept with dependencies. It's most helpful across teams, right, where you have one team that's relying on another. You can both see how you've done from a scheduling standpoint and also drill in to determine exactly what the dependency is, make sure that if there's any changes to how something is scheduled that you know about it. And this is a way that you can drive some communication. So if I'm someone who is producing a lot of work that others will consume, then if I'm making a change to my plan and I know that someone depends on me, then I'm going to want to make sure I communicate with them so that they can plan accordingly. So that's kind of the very, very detailed level cross-team collaboration that you have for dependency tracking. There's another element, though, that's important, and that is the ability to look at your release overall. So if you're the program manager, you want to be able to say, let me see all those dependencies that are out there for my release. And version 1 gives you a view that will show you both any backlog items that have a dependency, any chains that occur. So here we see that there's a couple places where you have your upstream dependency quick status check, which relies on credit check, which then a credit check will rely on it. And then downstream, eventually you'll get to being able to calculate your shipping. So that dependency chain becomes the most likely source of something that might not get done in the release because you do have those handoffs across teams. And that's a place where you'd want to spend a lot of energy from a program management standpoint to make sure the right things are being done. And you also, from this view, get some insight into any of the issues that are coming up. So if you have an issue on something that's in a dependency chain, that will be something you'd want to jump on right away. And so those are visible from this view as well. The goal, right, within an Agile organization is to become structure yourself and become mature enough that you'd have the nirvana of no dependencies showing up in this view. right? That's the goal, but in most organizations it takes a while, and it takes someone really focused on understanding what these dependencies are, making sure that as teams are working through the features that they are communicating very well around these cross-team dependencies, because that's a place where if you're going to maintain alignment in your organization, you have to have these dependencies being something that is honored and also quickly resolved if there's any issues. So that's a look into dependency tracking. And the final thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of gets to that dependencies discussion, but also just the ability to make program-level decisions, is that in version 1, you can synchronize your sprint schedules very easily. And that's what's been done for this development program. You'll notice here, even though I'm looking at the release 1 project, which is down here underneath call centers, it's just within this call center product, the release 1, I'm seeing a development schedule. And what that means is, if I'm at the development level within version 1 and I'm planning at that level, that's the level that's controlling the sprints. So when I go back to development and I look at the sprint, and let me reload. When I look at the sprints, and if I say, well, let's add a sprint 8 to that schedule, that sprint 8 is something that is going to be used by all the different projects within that program. So if I switch over to my release 1, then I'll see the same sprint 8. So if I'm a program manager, I don't have to be going around and trying to compile an aggregate view of what's happening in these different sprints that each team has. I'm able to very quickly say, what's happening in sprint 7? What's happening in sprint 8? And everyone's on the same page with what that means, when it starts, when it stops, and so forth. And the ability to do that allows you to have those points where you can make trade-off decisions. At the end of sprint 7, if we've learned something new, we may decide that the backlog for a particular team needs to change, because changing their backlog is going to allow us to meet our program goals. And that's the kind of decision that you want to be able to collaborate around if you're going to scale Agile to the program level. So that's a little bit into dependencies and how you can use those as part of your release planning. And then the final point I want to make at the program level is that going back into the planning rooms, for that interaction you're having as the release is underway to understand what's going on, there's a couple of views that become pretty helpful. The first view is the timeline view that we had already looked at. In addition to being something that can let you see your capacity compared to your the work planned, it's also a very useful information radiator on where you are today and how your features are progressing compared to your plan. So you can see that you've got a couple of features with this blue bar that are completed ahead of schedule from their planned end date, and then you've got a couple of features that are behind schedule. You got a good start here on the RMA feature. So you can use this as that feature level information radiator, which might drive some activity in other areas of the business, the way you're communicating out to your stakeholders. They may want to take a look at authentication and customer management as soon as it's available, and they're going to be able to look at this to get a feeling for the fact that is now available to them. So the feature timeline is helpful. You also can take a perspective of the more of a flow-based perspective and have a Kanban board for the features within your release. So here I'm able to see what are the features in progress that I'm trying to push to completion, which ones are still in breakdown, and then get really good insight into what the issues are and that are occurring within your release as you progress on these features. And then finally, I just want to touch base on the conversations and how that can be used. We saw earlier how Order Check had the need to had an issue around the credit card agreement not getting signed. Let's say that we just got it signed. We just got the agreement signed. I can share that out as Andre Agile to the entire team within the planning zone, and I also can even reference the item that it refers to, order check. And so now as I'm sharing that out with the organization, they're going to be able to see the progress as it's happening in real time, get updates as they're occurring, and that's a way that conversations can allow you to provide some positive insight into what's progressing, as well as additional detail and further decision making on areas that aren't clear. All right, so given the time constraints with us having a little bit of a technical glitch, I did want to move on to the portfolio level now. So I want to jump back into the main application and take a look again at that epic tree page, and this time I'm going to bounce all the way up to the portfolio level. And here, again, I'm looking at my set of initiatives, and I want to drill in and look at some of the attributes that are available on this epic item. The first attribute that we talked about a little bit already was swag, right? That's a higher level planning unit that I can enter on my initiatives to give an understanding of how much do we think this is going to cost when we go ahead and look at it. You can also add a value scale. So at the initiative level, you should have a good understanding of what is the value of this item, and you want to be making sure that you capture that information. You can also enter a risk scale. So how risky is this item? Do we understand the technology? Is it something where it's a sure thing in terms of the value, or is there a lot of learning that needs to go on before we have a good feeling for what the value is really going to be? So you have those attributes that are built in. You also have the ability to customize the items of version 1, and you can create attributes like an investment theme. So here we can use the investment theme to capture the different areas that we're investing in as a business, and we may want to manage to those areas to make sure that we're spending the right amount in each of them. So that's a look at the epic and its attributes. A couple of those attributes get used in some reporting. So if we move over to the epic board page here, I wanted to show you the bubble chart that you can create for your epic. So as you start to put in all of your different initiatives, you can then plot them on a bubble chart, and this is going to use the swag. The swag is the size, so this purple item is quite a large initiative compared to the others. It's also highly valuable. The value scale is up there. And then we have the risk scale here as well, and the color coding is done based on the priority of the item. So a lot of different ways that you can look at the data that you've captured in version 1 to help you get to what are the items that really should be at the top of our list, the ones that we want to make sure we push up in our priority order and then manage through to completion. So from a deciding what to do perspective, thinking more about the product management function, version 1 can give you some insight and help you make those right decisions for your portfolio level. The other aspect that comes up at the portfolio level is really around governance and how can we make sure we're doing the right thing. And so I, again, want to go back into one of the planning rooms that we've defined and look at the initiatives board here. So this is a board that's been set up to really model the governance we have around the initiatives in our organization. So analysis, something has to get maybe approved before you can start working on it. In this case, we're seeing that we've got a WIP limit of 4 on analysis, and right now we're over that WIP limit. We also have approval and implementation states. And all these states that you're creating as you progress your initiatives, those are something that are unique to your organization. So you can define those to match the way you're currently working. one thing that comes up quite often when you're looking at an initiative level Kanban board is the desire to drill down and say, well, the Cloud Call Center is in implementation, but what have we actually completed? And so version 1 allows you to do that by looking at the dashboard for that Cloud Call Center item. It's going to show you a couple things. First, the backlog progress. So how has this item been elaborated over time, and based on how all the work we've elaborated, where are we in terms of its completion? So this is a story level burn-up chart that gives you an insight into how you're delivering on that item. Below that, you have your breakdown from the initiative level to the features that make it up. You can see which features were completed, which ones are in progress, and then maybe which ones are still being broken down. So you can get some really good insight into where are you with a particular initiative just by drilling into the item from the initiative Epic board here within the planning room. Another area that I wanted to touch on, and then I think we're going to have to wrap it up and go into questions, is the ability to do analytics in version 1. So a couple of the analytics I wanted to share, and there is a whole analytics environment, but one of the things we've done that I think is really exciting is we've been able to take these analytics and put them into the planning room. So earlier I mentioned the creation of investment themes as a custom field. This report is using that information to help us understand that, well, we're spending 40% of our time on innovation, and then we have about half of our time that we haven't aligned to a particular investment theme right now. And so that would be an opportunity for us to make sure that we're understanding what we're doing a little bit better. You can get reports that break out your investment themes. I'm going to just make one last point around analytics. I wanted to touch on 3 examples of what I think the analytics can do for you within version 1. The first one was you can get insights into your different capacity allocations, such as which investment themes are you working on. You can get reports that align to different methodologies, such as the Scaled Agile framework, that's where this feature completion report comes from. And the third thing is you can get reports that allow you to do some lean analytics to get insight into how much time are we spending in a particular status for our epics, whether that's your business initiatives or features. So there's some a lot of power with how you can analyze the data that you're creating as you're using version 1. Yeah, I think with that, given that we're at the top of the hour, I want to turn it back over to you so we can answer some of the questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. That was awesome. Great job. Before we get to the Q&A portion, real quick, I just want to let everyone know that version 1 is interested in finding out about your challenges with Agile. And so we're making an offer here that we want you guys to participate in, and that is if you could send us an email to this address on the screen and let us know kind of the challenges that you guys are having around scaling Agile in your organization. We'd really like to hear from you around that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a raffle so that for all the emails that we get with this type of information, we're going to pick one organization and do what we call an Agile assessment, where we'll come on site to your organization and work with you for a few days to understand the challenges that you're having and help you roadmap out how you'll go about moving forward with Agile in a scaled environment. So there's a lot of value there. So please send us an email when you get a chance, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you and doing that giveaway. Okay. So let's move on to Q&A. Thank you again, Andy, for your presentation. Let's see what we've got online here. We've got a good question from Daniel Harrison here around monthly releases, because they actually release software every month. So with releasing software every month, that seems like a lot of overhead to be able to do this release management in the tool. Do you have any suggestions, Andy, on how that might be facilitated if they're doing monthly releases?
Yeah, that's it. So it brings up an important point that I didn't really nail as we were going through, and that is that when I was saying releases here, the focus is on a planning cadence. So that's what you'd want to have at your planning levels, inside your planning levels. So you have some organizations who release continually, right? They get a story done, boom, it's out. You may have release monthly and then as soon as that's ready, you're going to deploy it. What's most important is figuring out what is your planning cadence around that. It could be monthly. Monthly is pretty quick. I agree that's a lot of overhead. But what is the time where you want to get together as a program and say, hey, this is a good chunk of work that we can then deliver towards, and then as a program stop and reflect on how we've progressed and make changes to our direction. The Scale Agile framework has some guidance on that as being the U-curve optimization is 10 weeks. That's kind of the sweet spot where for a lot of places you can get enough done so that you've seen progress, and also you can plan that amount such that if you go longer than 10 weeks, sometimes you start to not have thought things through enough, and so you need to kind of replan before you get to maybe the 12 or 13 week point. And so there's no exact right answer for what your planning cadence should be, but there is some support for it being a little bit longer than a month. So if you were saying we deploy every month, that's our deployment cadence. Your planning cadence might be every 2 months. I would guide towards it being a little bit longer than a month. That is pretty frequent.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. That was a good question. I get that a lot. And, people get confused on the difference between the deployment cadence and the release planning cadence. So good. Thank you for that. We have another good question here from Tom Deegan. And maybe we'd want to share your screen at this point, Andy. Is there a portfolio report that shows the overall investment categories showing priority and effort estimates? Kind of that high level. Yeah.
Say it again. Ask the question again, because I'm not sure I fully understood it.
Is there a portfolio report that shows the overall investment categories showing priority and effort estimates? And I guess I was thinking of the epic tree at the portfolio level, probably, to see your overall high-level priority?
I can show a couple of views, and let me turn on the investment theme column. So if I'm looking at the portfolio level, I'm able to see a prioritized list, and then I can also turn on my investment themes column if I was using that to know kind of which theme am I hitting with these items. So that's one way that you can look at this. And here the swag is the amount of work that I expected to have in the different investment themes. There are some different reports you can run in our analytics environment that will start to allow you to get, I think, the view you were looking at. And so I'm just going to pull up an example here. So this is just maybe a leadership team dashboard where you're looking at current features for release. Here's the release allocation to different epics. Then below that, you could do like a forward-looking or backward-looking allocation of into your investment themes. And this is where the pie chart here, what are the units? Well, the units that you could use in version 1, if you were forward-looking, right, you could use swag. If you're backward-looking, you could use estimate because you've got estimates for stories. You could use effort if you're tracking effort. So the analytics lets you pick the unit you want to use to do the allocation reporting. You're not tied into a particular one. And this is where you can come to create a dashboard that really matches exactly what you're looking for, tying in your value and the different estimate units.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Why don't we take one more question here as we're over the top of the hour. And then just a reminder for everyone that's asked questions, we'll make sure to follow up with you in email and answer your questions offline if we don't get to it today. So the next question is around swags and estimates. There were a few questions around swags and what the units are. So maybe you could kind of cover that. But the question here in that context would be, can you provide an example or a demo on how story point estimates done compared to epic swags can determine progress at any point? I can repeat that.
Okay. So two questions there. The units on swag, I think their organizations are still exploring what the kind of best unit to use is for that. There's been a fair amount of discussion on that. So I think a lot of organizations, when you get up to the initiative level, they're wanting to get something that ties back to time. And if you're coming from an Agile mindset where you've talked a lot about relative estimation, that may not resonate as well, but at some point you're still being relative, right? So you might use man months for swag as a unit. That's one option. Scaled Agile Framework talks about using story points and kind of rolling those up, and that's another option that has some benefits of your units are consistent throughout, but it has the kind of drawback of you need to have the units normalized across teams, which can be difficult. So the swag is really something that the units are something we leave to the organization to figure out what makes sense for the way they are. So rather than changing everything, use whatever units you have in place now can be a good way to think about it and start introducing some relative estimation concepts. So I think that was maybe the first part of the question. And then the second part was really just understanding progress, I think, and how the units help with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Can we demo how you can track progress both at the story point and against the epic swag level to determine progress at any point in time? Maybe the epic timeline.
Yeah, so there's a couple different I think important discussion points there. So I did touch on the epic timeline, and I think that's a good pointer. You're able to see the progress bar here, and the progress bar on the epic timeline is looking at your points, your story points. So the idea there is that once you have something where you're tracking progress in a release, you want to have it broken down to stories such that you can then have that more granular progress tracking. In other organizations, they might say, well, wait a minute, that's not how we think. We're really focused on lean principles, and I think if you're trying to say, well, I'm not going to do the breakdown all up front for this feature, then it gets to an understanding of, well, using how things are flowing through your organization. So just taking for the example, I'm going to go back up to the portfolio level. I've got this cloud call center item. I can see on here there's a progress indicator for estimate, but and I walked through this earlier, a lot of times it's more valuable to say, what have we actually delivered, right? Our goal is not to deliver every possible thing we could for this epic. Our goal is to deliver the highest value items. And are you guys, I guess you guys are not seeing my screen again. Hold on. So I apologize for that. I'm going to share it out again. So here, I was looking first at the epic timeline, and we were looking at the progress indicator bar on those items, and that's using the story points. And then I switched over to the Epic board to touch base again on the drill down. So this is where the real indicator of progress in the Agile organization is not % complete. It's delivery. So what features have you delivered is the question you should be asking if you have an Epic or a business initiative you're tracking. Until you've delivered me something that I can get to customers, then you haven't really delivered anything yet. So I've got a couple completed features here. So that's the way that you can start to change your dialogue with the business around, hey, we're 20% complete on this really large initiative to, we've delivered these 2 features, we've delivered 2 of maybe 10 features for this initiative.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Andy. Nice job. Okay, guys. I think that'll conclude our webinar. We've got a couple logistics before we depart here. One is just a reminder that we'll be sending out a link to the recorded webinar, and we'll clean up the audio sections as well, so that should be a lot smoother. So look forward to that link. Also, we'll be announcing our next AgileLIVE webinar, and so look forward to an email soon around that. Probably will be in around 4 to 6 weeks, and should be an interesting topic around metrics. So we'll look forward to an email around announcing the AgileLIVE webinar series coming up. Again, apologies for the audio difficulties. We appreciate your patience in staying on the line. Thank you, Andy, for the great presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys again, hopefully in our next live webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.